It was July 15th, 1976. 26 children, ages 5 to 14, boarded a familiar yellow school bus, heading home after a day of summer classes and carefree fun. Behind the wheel was their bus driver, 55-year-old Ed Ray. Known for his quiet strength and kindness, Ed was a trusted figure in the community. But that routine ride home would become a descent into one of the most shocking crimes in American history. As the bus rolled along a dusty country road, a white van suddenly veered in front of it, blocking the path. Three men in pantyhose masks armed with guns stormed aboard. Screams, stillness, shock. This wasn't a robbery. It was a coordinated, calculated kidnapping. At gunpoint, the children and Ed Ray were herded off the bus. Hidden behind nearby bamboo, two additional vans waited. The kidnappers loaded their captives inside, crammed in tight, hot, and terrified. For nearly 11 hours, the group was driven through the night, sealed in those vans with no food, no water, no bathroom. The heat was suffocating. The silence, broken only by sobs and whispered prayers. Some of the younger kids cried out for their parents. Others sat frozen, unsure of what was happening. 14-year-old Michael Marshall stepped forward. Quiet, afraid, but brave. He comforted the younger ones and stayed close to Ed. But their nightmare was far from over. After hours on the road, the vans came to a stop at a rock quarry in Livermore, over 100 miles from Chowchilla. The captives were led into what looked like a hole in the earth, but it wasn't a cave. It was a buried moving truck. The kidnappers had turned it into a bunker of sorts, rigged with crude air vents, battery-powered fans, and a few supplies: mattresses, cereal, peanut butter, water. Then, the trap was sealed, 12 feet underground, covered with dirt, heavy batteries, and wooden beams. They were buried alive. Inside, the heat built quickly. The air was thin, the stench unbearable, the fans barely functioned. The roof began to bow inward. Some children cried, some screamed. Others sat quietly in shock. Then a voice pierced the panic. Michael Marshall stood up. "If we're going to die," he said, "we're going to die getting the hell out of here." He and Ed Ray, along with a few older boys, began working. They stacked mattresses, clawed at the manhole cover, pushed, dug, inch by inch. Their hands bled, their bodies shook, but they didn't stop. Hours passed. Then, a crack of light, and then sunlight. It was the most beautiful thing they had ever seen. One by one, the kids climbed out of the darkness and into the daylight. Dirty, dehydrated, but alive. They walked to a nearby guard shack and called for help. 16 hours after being buried, the unimaginable had happened. They had escaped. As news spread, Chowchilla erupted in a mixture of relief and disbelief. Parents wept. Reporters flooded the town. The entire nation watched, stunned. But the question on everyone's mind was simple. Who could do this? Soon, the answer came. And it was more shocking than anyone imagined. The kidnappers weren't hardened criminals. They weren't desperate or dangerous in the usual sense. They were rich kids. Frederick Newhall Woods IV, the son of the quarry owner, and brothers Richard and James Schoenfeld, came from wealthy Bay Area families. They didn't need the money, they just wanted more of it. Their plan? Bury the kids, demand a $5 million ransom, and vanish. But the plan fell apart before it began. The phone lines in Chowchilla were jammed with frantic calls. The kidnappers couldn't get through. They went to sleep, waiting for their moment. Instead, their hostages outsmarted them. They were arrested days later. All three were sentenced to life in prison without parole. Though in time, that changed. Parole was eventually granted. The last of the three, Frederick Woods, was released in 2022, 46 years after the crime. But for the children, the trauma never fully faded. There was no therapy, no national conversation about PTSD, just silence. And Disneyland, a well-meaning attempt to bring joy that couldn't touch the pain beneath. Years later, psychiatrist Dr. Lenore Terror interviewed the survivors. Every single child showed signs of post-traumatic stress, nightmares, anxiety, fear of buses, fear of men with beards, fear of darkness. Michael Marshall struggled with alcoholism for years. Larry Park, who was just 6 at the time, battled rage and trauma deep into adulthood, until he found peace through forgiveness. Jody Heffington, 10 years old when it happened, spent her life making sure the world didn't forget. She fought to keep the kidnappers behind bars. She died in 2021, still haunted by that day. Today, Chowchilla remembers. There's a monument honoring the victims. A town park bears Ed Ray's name, and the story of what happened is taught, not to frighten children, but to show them what courage looks like. This wasn't just a crime. It was a moment that changed lives, exposed the cracks in our understanding of trauma, and ultimately reshaped how we care for young survivors. The Chowchilla Kidnapping is not just a footnote in true crime history. It's a story of resilience, of unity, of children who, against all odds, clawed their way out of the darkness. It reminds us that heroes aren't always grown-ups. Sometimes they're just kids, with scraped knees, tear-streaked faces, and unbreakable spirits. And that even in the blackest night, the light can still find its way in.